lesson is on introductory transitional words, phrases, and clauses. Why use transitions? Well, take a look at the examples below. What is the difference between them? Pause the video if you need a minute to read. If you said the difference is that sample number 2 has some transitional phrases and words at the beginning of the sentences, you're correct. So, where do I place transitions in my writing? Transitional words and phrases can appear at the beginning, middle, or end of a sentence. However, for this lesson, we will focus on those that come at the beginning of sentences. How do I know which transitional words or phrases to use? Well, there are different categories of transition words and phrases. Transitions should be added to support the flow and clarity of the writing piece, according to the purpose of the sentence or detail. So you have received notes that show you some of the categories that transitions fall into, but we'll take a look at some more here. Here are 7 different categories of transitional words or phrases. We are going to focus on these 4. The yellow circled ones to illustrate or example are the ones you'll use to introduce text evidence. Addition, when you're adding additional text evidence. Circled in blue here, that's for your elaboration, and circled in red is your closing sentence. So, words that add additional information. These are used to introduce new ideas, expand on a topic, or add more information. And some of the examples are, for example, such as, for instance, as illustrated by, and in this case. There are more than that as well. And our example over here, in addition to your daily reading homework, you are asked to study your multiplication facts for our quiz on Friday. So here you have an introductory transition attached to a whole introductory phrase. Some of these are used to illustrate or provide examples. These are the ones that would be for your second piece of evidence. Examples like furthermore, additionally, in addition, and also. And our sample sentence, eating too much sugar is bad for your health. Furthermore, it can cause damage to teeth. Cause and effect. These are the ones that are circled in blue and that you'll use to introduce your elaboration. Words like therefore, so, as a result, because, consequently, thus, and hence. So we have our sample over here. Jared was late for school and didn't take the time to tie his shoelaces properly as he got dressed. As a result, he tripped over them and fell while he ran to catch the bus. Poor Jared. And then we have those transitions that are used to conclude, such as, in conclusion, finally, to summarize, and overall. And our examples over here. In conclusion, those are the reasons I believe students should have more recess during the school day. So, to summarize this lesson, many transitional words, phrases, and clauses can be added to your writing. Not every sentence needs a transitional word, phrase, or clause. However, using them in appropriate places can be quite beneficial. As a result, writing will flow more easily as your ideas connect smoothly. Try adding a variety of transitions throughout your writing to practice using them. It's a part of the rubric for an ACEs response and an expectation in your writing. Another way to include strong transition words is to use some of your AWOOBIS words. These are particularly useful when you're beginning your elaboration and explaining how your evidence connects to your topic sentence. One of the best that you can use is the word because. However, when and since are also often useful AWOOBIS words to use as a transition to introduce your elaboration. Here is a sample ACEs response. This is based on the short story, The Test. And this response uses a variety of different transitions, including because to introduce some of the elaboration. You can take a minute to take a look at this, pause if you need to look at the variety that are used and to see how each one is a little bit different. So each time the evidence is introduced, the transition that's used to introduce the evidence, it's not the same every time. And the same is true with the elaboration. Very frequently, students start elaboration with this shows or this reveals, but there are different ways that you can do it. And the writer of this response has used a few different ways, and that keeps the response from becoming repetitive and kind of boring to read. And it's also just a more sophisticated way of showing the relationships between all of the ideas in your response.